finding a difference quotient means using this to find your solution. Now, you won't need to memorize this. I'll give you this. And for right now, you may be asking why we're doing this. And right now, I don't have a great answer for you other than just do it because we're asking you to do it. But I promise you, this is really sort of your first glimpse at calculus for what's coming up in the future. It'll make a lot more sense then. And the good news is you'll have some shortcuts to use once you get to calculus. But for now, let's work on just working out what the difference quotient means. So here's what I want you to do. Start with your original function, and anywhere you see an x, replace it with this x plus h. So let me rewrite this problem as 5 times x plus h, and just rewrite everything the exact same way, just with x plus h plugged in for where you see x. Then go ahead and throw that whole thing in a big bracket. Okay? Next up, I just want you to subtract the original function. So right after what you just wrote with the bracket, just a subtraction sign, you can use more brackets if you'd like, and just rewrite the original problem, 5x plus 2. And you'll notice the last part of this, the quotient part, is this whole thing is being divided by h. So we'll just do a whole big divided by h. Now this looks really complicated, but what's nice is a bunch of stuff's going to cancel out pretty quickly. So my first part in the brackets, let's go ahead and distribute that 5. So I'm going to have a 5x plus 5h, and then plus 2, and I'll keep that in brackets, although I may or may not need them. And the second part, there's nothing to really simplify, but make sure you distribute that subtraction sign. So I've got a minus 5, I'll use brackets again, minus 5x, and then a minus 2. Actually, let me not have the brackets because that's technically not right. So I'll just have a minus 5x and then a minus 2. And again, the whole thing's being divided by h. Well, here's where things should start to cancel out. If nothing cancels out, something's gone wrong for you. So I see I've got a positive 5x and a negative 5x, cross those out. I see I have a positive 2 and a negative 2, so cross those out. And all that's left then in the numerator is 5h. And all that's left in, well, the denominator has always been just h, but I can see that now those h's will cross out, and so after all this is said and done, I end up with just a 5. And like I said, this probably makes no sense, or it doesn't really have a purpose for you right now. That's okay, I promise you, this will be very, very important later on if you're taking calculus, and the good news is you'll come up with some really simple, really easy shortcuts instead of doing all this work, okay? Let me show you one more example doing the difference quotients, okay? So once again, we're going to start by replacing all the x's with x plus h. So this time there's 2 of them to replace. So everywhere you see an x, just go x plus h instead, squared, plus, we're going to replace that with x plus h as well, and then plus 1. And again, throw that whole thing into brackets. And then after that, we're going to subtract, just rewrite the original problem. So x squared plus x plus 1. Okay, so the x plus h, we're going to subtract that from the original one. That whole thing is divided by h. It looks horrible, and it's not fun, but it's not going to be too bad. I promise you things should cancel out. This first part, I want to make sure I do x plus h times x plus h. Well, if you need to do FOIL or do the box method, go ahead and pause the video and try that. I'm going to sort of do that part in my head. Hopefully you can follow along with what I'm doing. Once I distribute, though, or once I FOIL or box method that out, I'm going to end up with x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. Next up, I don't really need the parentheses there, so I'll just drop them. So plus x plus h, and then plus 1. Remember, a bunch of this stuff should end up canceling out. All right, and then the last part of this, I'm going to distribute that negative sign, so make sure everything gets subtracted. So minus x squared, and notice I've dropped the brackets, minus x, and then minus 1. And once again, the whole thing is being divided by h. Okay, the fun part, if you consider any of this fun, is to now find things that cancel out. Well, I've got a positive x squared and a negative x squared, so cross those out. I also see I've got a positive x and negative x, a positive 1 and negative 1. And so what I end up with after all this is a 2xh plus an h squared, and then plus an h divided by h. Well, there's a whole lot of extra h's in here, so let's go ahead and cancel one of those out from every single piece. I can do that since everything has an h in it. So that h is gone, that one's gone, that one's gone, and I lose one of these. So I still have a single h left over, but I do have one of those. And so what's left over is a 2x plus an h. And remember, this h isn't gone completely. It's still a positive 1. I suppose another way you could have thought about this, if you like factoring, is you could have factored out an h And you'll see that that's another way to figure out that there's that plus 1 left over. So there's the h's crossing out. So there is my final answer. Again, I promise you this will be much more relevant later on when you're taking calculus, and even better, you'll learn some shortcuts for doing these problems when you're doing calculus.